Hey everyone, Seth at Hub City Vintage, and this week I've got something a little different for you. This watch came to me from a client a couple of weeks ago for service, and we got a couple of questions about it. This one specifically is a bit of a mystery, but if you weren't familiar with this dial, this Teal diver, that is genuine. This was created in back in '84 for the JDM market. In fact, there were several core models that got a Teal dial treatment. This one, along with a 2A, 2-3 ladies diver. Got one here you can see it's actually from the same client. There's also a 6458 model, an H556 Baby Arnie Silver Wave model. I think I'm leaving something else out. There may be even a couple more, but we don't know a ton about why this Teal dial was created. It was a bit of a one-off. But we do know a few things, and thought we would sort of dig into this one, and I'll let you guys help me uncover the mystery of this particular watch as we go. So what we do know about these Teal divers, they were obviously, as I said, for the JDM market only. You can see there a kanji day wheel on this one. Even the ladies model has the kanji day wheel. They were all created just for the JDM model, not sold outside of that domestic market. And from what we can gather there's not much literature to learn from, but anecdotally, every model I've ever seen and those that have been presented have all been from 1984. In fact, we'll take a look at this one. The ladies 2A23 here. Let's get in focus there. So we can see that one's 84 from the 4 at the front of the serial number there, and this one's actually from July of that year, so an earlier model. But as far as we know, the 7548s that have been seen and found have all been from December of that year, 1984. So the serial number would be a 4 followed by a D. And if you go and do some research on your own, I'm sure if you just type Teal dial Seiko and do a Google search and follow that with 1984, you'll come up with lots of stories and many forums of people sharing the serial numbers of their own. And so we do know that there seems to be pretty substantial evidence that this watch should have a December of 1984 serial, or at the very least, 1984 serial, and this one specifically, it does not. Our serial number here is from February of 1981, so that would be quite a bit earlier than any that have been seen by a few years, and so that's kind of a big question. Though, interestingly, we can see that this one has the correct model number. It's a 7548 700C, but we also know that there was a 700C model that had the orange dial, and it certainly was available in 1981 for a few years after that as well. So it's likely the case that this watch at some point either was moved to another case, or that the case back was maybe perhaps accidentally switched over in a service at some point. Maybe there was an orange dial that was nearby, someone switched the case backs, who knows. But what we're going to try to do is at least deduce down, is the dial on this watch from December of '84, or at least from 1984. And the way we're going to do that is to dig in. I've got to service this watch anyway, and I'd like to show you guys a few things that I like about this watch. As I mentioned, it's virtually a battery-driven 6309, and I'll show you. We'll take a look. All of the calendar side components of this watch are absolutely interchangeable with the mechanical 6309, and really on the back side you just got your circuit and battery, and you'll see really other than those components, it looks almost identical to the 6309. It's really a very well built, quite overly engineered quartz watch. It was a great start for Seiko into their core diver range, and you certainly, if you don't have a 7548 or 46 or 49 tuna, do yourself a favor and get one. There's some great models all throughout those 745 series, lots of divers and good casual stuff too, but they are incredible watches, very well built. Coils can last a long time if they're cared for, and if you follow up with battery changes and keep any corrosion from happening, they can last for virtually decades. So we're going to dig into this one and figure out if we can see if the dial production date matches the serial number on the back of this watch. As you probably know, many of you know, most Seiko models, the dial on the back side will have a 2-digit stamp, usually in blue or black, It won't be a full serial number, but it will have, similar to the serial number on the back, those first 2 digits should be, they'll be stamped on the back of the dial, and they should be within a couple of months range of the serial number. Many times if you've got a watch with a serial number from, say, 1, 2 here, and then if you get a dial and you take a look at it, turn it over, and you see maybe the dial's stamped with 3, 4, that would certainly be an issue. It would likely mean that the dial at some point was replaced in your watch, perhaps at service, but we would like to see maybe a 3, 4 months tops variance, maybe 5 months, that being a bit of a stretch, but within a certain range of the serial number. And what we hope to see is just either the same month and year or one very close. So I'll be very curious. I'm hoping that this dial has a date production stamp on the back of it, and that we can solve this mystery and see if we can figure out exactly what's going on here. But I can tell you, this is one of those situations where the devil is certainly in the details. If you weren't familiar with this watch and you were to purchase it outright, I could imagine that on the surface it looks like everything is as it should be. Having the correct model and date, those first 2 serial number digits is not something that maybe a lot of people would consider when they're first looking at this watch, and I don't know at this point if that would have even deterred me from buying this one, because it really is cosmetically, what a beautiful example. You can see the bezel insert is practically flawless, and rather than a silver backing, you've got black paint over a gold backing. So those numerals around the bezel insert there are in gold, as well as the hour and minute hand are finished in gold as well. On the typical stainless steel 7548, you've got polished silver hands, but here we've got a nice gold finish with an all satin black reverse lollipop second hand. Truly just an amazing watch, amazing dial color, very rare in any capacity. And even with the incorrect case back, I certainly don't think that might be something that would drive me away from this watch. I could probably come to an agreement with someone that would have this watch go from them to me. So let's dig in. Let's pull this movement from the case, take a closer look, get these hands removed, and take a look at the production date on the back of the dial. Okay, so we've got our movement pulled from the case. You can see that over here in the movement holder. Here is our case back and case. We've got this battery clamp / spring here. This is an item that's added to the 7548, 7549, the larger diver models, something you won't see in the 7546, but this helps to hold the battery more securely in place. And you can see 2 holes here on either side of these wings, and there are 2 very specialized screws. They've got large, deep heads. They're under a lot of tension. They're specific to this part and this watch. So if you decide to try to attempt a battery change on your own, just know, be very careful. It's quite easy to send either or both of those springs flying into the ether, never to be seen again. So just take your time, use some Rotico to hold that clamp down in place and easily lift that clamp. We've got our battery here. Of course, we've got our movement ring and spring, our dial spacing ring. Both of these items could swap over to a 6309, no problem. You can see our hands here. Of course, in this instance, they are gold. And of course, our dial here. And the big moment we've all been waiting for was to see, does our dial stamp match the production date of the serial number on the case back? And before I show you that, I want to tell you I peeked ahead of time, and it's a bit of a disappointment, a little bit of a letdown. I'd hope to see a very clear stamp that's clear evidence of what we're looking at here, but I think I've got it figured out. I just want to show you what I had hoped to see when I turn this dial over. I'm going to do that just showing you a couple of other dial stamps that'll give you a good idea of what it should look like in a normal situation. So these are just from a few donor watches I had laying around. Here's a white 7009 Arabic dial. If we turn it over, clearly you can see there T, and of course we've got the numbers 9 and 5. That's going to give this a production date of likely 1979 in May of that year. We've got a 6309 Arabic dial here. If we turn this one over, this one I liked because it's sort of faded. You can see that it does happen. Here, let's move the sliding and get a better look. Clearly there, that's an O, even though that upper right hand portion is a bit loose, but a 0 or an O and a 4, making this one probably 1980 in April of that year. And I've also got this yellow 6139 dial that's a pretty close representation of what I'd hoped to find on the back of this one. So what we've got is in blue here, just a 4 and a 3. And I want you to look at this upside down, because honestly, that's how I'm going to have to show you the teal dial. It gives us the clearest picture of what I think I see, and I think you'll probably agree is there. So just remember the shape of this 4, how it's set up, and even the shape of that 3 will come into play. But there you go. This is a 1974, March of that year. And let's go ahead and get this teal dial turned over and take a look at what I'm pretty sure is the production stamp. I missed it on the first several passes, and I think you'll agree when we look at it right side up, it doesn't look like much of anything. But above the day-date window here, it looks to me like we've got a 4 here. You can see the vertical leg of the 4, and then of course this outward triangle to close up the 4, and what I see here is an 8, pretty clearly an 8. I think that's pretty easy to make out. Honestly, right side up, it didn't look like much of anything. I thought we just had something of a blemish in the metal there from heat. Looks like maybe like a little bit of bluing or something, but obviously not much there. And I checked it out in regular daylight, under UV light, and just to try to get a good idea of what we're looking at there. But I think I feel pretty comfortable. I would feel comfortable testifying under oath that this watch looks to me like it was produced in August of 1984. Unfortunately for our client, that does mean that he doesn't have the earliest known production of Teal 7548 diver, but that in fact that I would guess that the case back was switched at some point. I'm doubting the entire case was changed out. We have the correct bezel and insert here, and the chapter is right. I think it would have taken more work to swap out the case than it would let the case back somehow. Either two very similar watches were present, both 700Cs, maybe one an orange dial, case backs were accidentally swapped out, or maybe the original case back was missing at some point, and this was the closest that could be sourced to keep it as correct as possible. But it just goes to show you that you really have to dig into some of the finer details when you're hunting watches. It was a good catch by the owner of this watch to want to see the production date on the back of that dial, but I'm guessing, unfortunately, that is the wrong case back for this watch. It is absolutely a beautiful watch, and he's still pretty lucky to have it. As you can see on the case back here, there's some watchmaker's markings. Many people just use a burnisher or a graver to engrave their marks, but here you can see in likely a felt tip pin. I'm guessing at some point this one was serviced outside of the US, because the date set up there is not how we typically do it here in the States. They've got their day first, and then a month, and then the year, and with periods between, rather than how we typically use hyphens or slashes. So on the 14th day of October, and I'm guessing 03, this one looks like it got a service, and so yeah, it's had some care given to it over its life. There's a couple of other marks there that were also done in pen that have sort of been washed away. Regardless, a wonderful watch, and just a good lesson about learning everything you can about a style or reference that you might be interested in, and getting all of the information together before you pull that trigger. Make sure you're buying what you hope you're buying, and if nothing else, it's a great story for this one. A beautiful watch. All right, so for our Patreon fam, you guys stick around. You've probably heard me say on more than one occasion and in copy that I think of the 7548 and 6309 divers as something more akin to brothers than cousins, and that's because the 7548 is literally built off the 6309 movement architecture, and I want to show you guys some of the similarities really that are just pretty incredible, how they went about putting the 7548 and 60 together based on the 6309 movement. As you can see, even from the top side here, our crown and stems are practically the same. For Patreon, we're going to take a closer look at these two and look at some more of the likes and compare these kind of head to head, see what you think. And if you want to check out that video, you can join us over at Patreon. $7 a month gets you access to exclusive content. We do comprehensive rundowns and sneak peeks of all of our upcoming inventory and a whole lot more. And otherwise, I hope you liked this video. If you did, give us a like below. Certainly, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. And thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.